Namaste, Jai Hind, and wish you all a very, very happy Independence Day, ladies and gentlemen. Bharat is on a course, on a path, a trajectory of growth, but with it also come a lot of challenges. What we tried to do in this very, very short span of time over the course of the next half hour is to try and create a platform where we could get some of the more thinking, experienced minds across four pillars. So there is policy, there is economy, there is security, and of course there is culture and history, and get their thoughts on how Bharat needs to progress further. Where does it need to go from here, and how will it do that? That's the big question, ladies and gentlemen. So let's, without much further delay, go straight across to them. We've got Riva Ganguly Das, the former Secretary East at the MEA with us. We've got Gautam Chikkarmane, economist, author, and wearing a lot of hats, advising the government on policy too. So Gautam Chikkarmane, thank you very, very much. Namaste. And Ata Hasnain ji, namaste. Jana Sahab, always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
And we also have Sonal Mansingh ji joining us here for a very, very special conversation. So now I'm going to talk less and it's time for us to listen. The idea, thought process to the ladies and the gentlemen is the blueprint for Bharat from your own perspectives, from your own sphere of influence, experience and indulgence, if I may say so. So let me start with you, Riva ji, because there's a lot that's happening in the neighborhood, and we are all wondering, where does Bharat rise if there are going to be so many hegemonistic forces trying to crowd around this space in the subcontinent? So how do you see the next, say, 23 years for us?
First, thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here to share my thoughts on this important issue. I think let me start first by the world we live in. It's a very, very complex world, and it is changing very fast. All our previous assumptions about the world have almost crashed around us. Today, you know, foreign policy is done not on the basis of any ideology. It's basically you conduct your foreign policy on the basis of your interest. National interest was always central to foreign policy, but now, you know, global alignments have become such that you have to choose your friends as per your interest, as per your, you know, how you move forward. So, moving forward, there can be two scenarios. One scenario can be that, you know, all the conflict that we see around us gets settled and there is one supreme power in the world, like we saw after the Cold War, which, you know, which power then is the primary power determines a lot of things. The other more likely possibility would be that, you know, the world sort of moves as it is and you have to be very quick footed and move with the world. Because today, you know, your strategic environment changes faster than you can think.
Yeah.
And the way in which India is conducting itself, it's like a big power. India has just done a very successful G20. India is the respected voice of the global South. So there is a lot of expectation from India globally as well as domestically.
Yeah.
So from a time when, you know, people did not really pay much attention to foreign policy, when, you know, it was seen as something alien, we have reached a stage where foreign policy, people take a lot of interest in foreign policy. There is much more expectation from those who conduct our foreign policy, and there is much more at stake. So looking into the future, I think what Indian foreign policy will have to do, which is very, you know, intertwined with what happens domestically, which is, you know, unless you have high growth, unless you are economic powerhouse, nobody will take you seriously. So you have to grow very fast. You have to keep growing, and
does this strategic autonomy come at a cost? And should we continue to walk this path? Even if there is a government change or a political shift in the years to come, should we stay on this path, or what's your thought? Do you think if governments change, this path will be let go of, or it will be compromised?
There is no alternative to strategic autonomy in my view, because, you know, the earlier way of thinking that, you know, you can align with this, that and the other no longer is, that's not a possibility anymore. You have to, you know, look after your interest in a fast changing world where global powers are conflicting with each other, but who, this conflict, this kind of immense conflict cannot go on for a very long time. So how will this power equation work out in the future is something, we have to see. But for a country of India's size, I think strategic autonomy works for us. And, if you look at multilateralism, which has just not worked as far as peace and security is concerned. So the future is of minilaterals, alliances with like-minded partners on like-minded issues, and issue-based alliances, issue-based concerns. Because in future, what we have to do is, your foreign policy has to cater to your domestic needs for investment, to your domestic needs for resources, your domestic need for digital, as we move digital, and technology, cutting across all areas. So technology is going to play a very, very important role, and for which we have to be prepared domestically, which means have the right skill set, have the right education policy, have that economic growth in place and policies.
Where all of this has to come from one chain of thought as to who am I as Bharat. So Sonal Mansingh ji, do we know who am I as Bharat? Before I get into the economics and the security aspect of it, let me ask you this.
That's a beautiful question. Bharat, Bhavaragatala. For me, it is the amalgamation of all the beauty, splendor, majesty, history, geography, the sacred geography of Bharat. And the combination is so grand that wherever I've traveled around the world, I believe, I'm told, I've exuded that feeling that Bharat, the great country, the only living civilization over millennia, and ever changing, ever new, and yet ancient. So it's a very, very, what shall I say, it's a puzzle for a lot of people. It's a puzzle for me as well. And what makes Bharat tick even today, with so much diversity we talk about, so many problems. Okay, so who doesn't have problems? But how does Bharat navigate these problems? People think that you are sitting on a cinder box is going to blow up, and it doesn't blow up. It again goes forward, and sometimes it even shows the way. Marg dikhana, margadarshan. It's a very big term, but yes, Bharat has done it. Bharat's still doing it, and I feel that Bharat has yet a very important, significant role to play, because the basic philosophy that binds Bharat is something so precious. It's something so rich.
But do we think of ourselves as Bharatiya? Do we have this concept of one nation, or are we still have not been able to evolve out of our regionalism, our language, cultural roots, or the riyasati mindset, if I may say so? Do we think of ourselves as a nation, and can every Bharatiya define themselves clearly? When somebody would ask you, who are you? I'm an Indian or I'm a Bharatiya. What does that mean? Do you believe that's important for us to be able to define and have clarity about if we need to go in a particular direction over the next, say, 23 years, by the time we are 100 years old as a nation in 2047?
140 crore, and you think that each one you expect will say, I'm Bharatiya. There's degrees of involvement, let's say, degrees of self-realization, consciousness. But I feel that if you ask a French man or a German or a Spaniard, they would first say, I'm from Spain. They won't say, I'm European. India is like Europe. Where in the world, in any country, you have so many spoken languages, 22 or 29 have the different scripts. Can you and I read Tamil? No. Can they read Bengali? No. So I think we tend to forget that India, yes, it's a country, nation, but with so many different components which have different ideology, different ideas, different format, different languages, different cultural communities. And yet there is a golden thread that ties everything together in a beautiful garland. So I think India is undefinable. And if you are asking who's a Bharatiya, anyone who lives in Bharat, इस मिट्टी से है, वो भारतीय है, वो भारतीय है.
जो इस मिट्टी का है, जो इस मिट्टी से है, वो भारतीय है, and you identify with the land. So now again the whole aspect, General Sahab, of the geography comes. But we are a nation which have nearly about 6,000 square kilometers of ours, which is not defined. It's got no boundary. So how do we continue to preserve this identity, this map in our head that this is Bharat?
See, Anand, first of all, thank you, Anand, for inviting me for this very important program, I think, on the eve of Independence Day. You see, the growth of India is something which is inevitable. And the inevitability of it is linked to the economics also to a great extent. We are looking to be $5 trillion, $10 trillion, and maybe much more by 2047. Having said that, I think stability is going to be the major factor, which is going to enhance this capability to achieve those aspirations. And it's not going to be an easy process because there are lots and lots of obstacles, as you have just identified yourself. And since you have spoken about the disparity, the large number of people within India, diversity within India, I think let me start with that automatically. Normally, I would have spoken with external security or with border security, but let me start with internal security. No doubt, this is going to be a very major challenge for India. But I find that as economic conditions improve, as more and more people come out of poverty, it happened in China, I think 750 million people lifted out of poverty. Here, as more and more people come out of poverty, aspirations to a better life, the quality of life, etc., automatically these things will start taking a back step. So I think the diversity is an important aspect, and I fully agree with Sonal Mansingh ji that everyone who's living on this soil is a Bharatiya, deserves to be here and needs to be a part of the Indian growth story together. But to come to external security, that's where the major problem is going to be. When you start growing in this manner, when your nation is seen to be coming onto a platform, then obstacles from abroad start coming your way, and it's going to be starting from the neighborhood itself, and we've got a very, very volatile neighborhood, as you're aware, and externally too, since we will be a major power in the years to come. So for that, I would say you need to be sure that war avoidance is one of your principles, because there will be a lot of people who will want you to go to war. And I think, to quote our Honorable Prime Minister, this is not the season for war. This is what he told Mr. Putin himself. This is a time to look for aspirations and growth. And there will be people who will want us to get embroiled in these kind of situations. Avoiding those are very important. Why? Because the future is not about conventional wars of the kind that we are seeing happening in Ukraine. It's all about hybrid wars. It's all about ideological wars. It's about economic wars. It's about terrorism. And we are seeing the second cycle of global terror probably rising from Afghanistan, coming into Pakistan and coming in our direction. We have to be strong enough to be able to withstand that. How does that happen? With unity, of course, number one. Clarity of your national aim, right? And I would say an all-of-government approach. Security cannot just be the approach left to the armed forces, the police forces, or even the diplomats of the country. It has to be, every department of India has to be a part of this effort towards national security. Having said that, I would also, since I am with the National Disaster Management Authority today, I would say one of the very important aspects of security that we will have to look at is the threat from disasters. Climate change.
Yeah.
And we are seeing this year, and this is going to get worse by the year. So I think technicalization and technology in every sphere, technology in the sphere of armed forces, technology in the sphere of intelligence, technology in terms of cyber security, space warfare, every domain where technology makes a difference, we will have to make sure that we have an enhanced footprint of technology, and that should be the way forward.
But all of this will happen only if we got money in the pocket, right? So let me ask Gautam Chikarmane that at 8% growth, KVS has written India at 100 can be 55 trillion economy, saying that once in 8 years you can go up. So he's got economics there. He's put out something where he says this is a formula and we can get to becoming a 55 trillion economy, but we need to be a manufacturing hub. Now, is this all wishful thinking? Are we anywhere prepped for this?
Your question is so simple that it's more complex than the most complex question asked. I agree with Subbu. I have done my own numbers.
Yes.
I was making a presentation at Helsinki and the numbers were plus minus similar. But I think the error that both he and I can make, or most people do make, is that thinking that the growth curve is going to be a linear rise. There will be ups and downs like the Sensex, perhaps not as volatile. There will be ups and downs. To me, I think we are going to become the third largest economy within the next 12 months. Not because we have done very well, it's because Japan has come down. So Japan is now lower because of its currency issues, is now lower than Germany. We are going to cross Germany. We are going to add about $400 billion to our GDP this year, which is about the size of Denmark. Going forward, I think I am very optimistic and hopeful, and I see the tailwinds behind us taking us forward in the direction that you mapped. 30 trillion by 2047, 55, 48, my number was 48 to 50 trillion by 2050. And that is based on a growth rate. You know, when 1991 reforms happened, so the first 44 years from 1947 to 1991, we grew at 6.5% based on nominal but currency adjusted, as in dollar terms. From 91 till 2021, we've grown at 8.5%.
Yes.
And I don't see any reason why we cannot grow by 8.5% over the next 30 years, given the new reforms that have happened. There are problems, like farm reforms haven't happened. They will have to find a new way to do that. Land reforms will not happen. So we will have to find new way to create land, for instance, through the railways or the public sector enterprises, the surplus lands there. But otherwise, we've got GST. Within the next 6 months, we will have a direct taxes code. I think we are becoming far more efficient, far more digital, far more able to process the velocity of money in the economy. We are far better equipped than ever before. There are some smaller reforms that will happen. For instance, compliance reforms. Jan Vishwas bill came act came last year. Jan Vishwas 2, which decriminalizes economic offences, will happen perhaps in the next, perhaps before the winter session, around the winter session, that should happen. I think with all this, what is happening is that we have a young demographic, which is to our advantage. It is unskilled, which we can try and skill, but which is also being taken towards that there is no need for you to work, you just sit at home, here are some more freebies for you, here is some more easy money coming your way, etc. So the rate of, for a country like India, where cheap labor is one of the advantages, and I'm not saying it should remain this advantage forever, suddenly we are dulling that edge. And I think COVID showed us what that dullness means when people just vanished overnight. So that is one threat. I don't think freebies is the way. I think opportunities, they are increasing at a very furious pace. Now, earlier in the discussion, there was a talk about unity. I think India needs unity, but the definition of unity is not uniformity. If you speak Bengali, so you will be a Bengali first. If you speak Kannada, you are a Kannada first. I don't think so. I don't think that's a very surface level way of looking at unity. Uniformity is not the India way. Uniformity is the way of those who have one religion, one God, one philosophy, one direction, one economic growth kind of people. India, as she mentioned, is so diversified that we cannot afford to have this. What we are not looking for uniformity. You and I, despite heading towards one direction, will never think the same way. Will never articulate our thoughts in the same way, and we shouldn't. That is what democracy is.
let me put it this way. She talked about a sutra that binds us all, a thread, invisible thread. So in the Bhagavad Gita, that's what Krishna calls himself as the Sutre Maniganaiva. So we are all pearls, but it's the invisible string that binds. What invisible string? When I say, what is it that will sustain? I'm looking at dharma as what will hold us up together, what will sustain. So if you were to define this, how would you? Okay, why don't you start and then we'll go the other way. Go back.
So I think for economics, trying to limit myself to economics is very difficult because I do want to step out. But as a $4 trillion powerhouse, we have remained since 1947 attached to following either Europe initially, then USSR through socialist policies, now USA. We have not discovered our own Arthashastra. I'm not talking about Kautilya's Arthashastra, but our own the Indian way, the India way. What is the way we deal with money? How do we grow? What is the meaning of money? Who is a Vaishya? We celebrate Bill Gates, we celebrate Jack Ma, but we don't. Our own Jack Ma's and Bill Gates, we spit on them every day. I think this thing about where we, because we were poor, we sought virtue in being poor. पैसा तो हाथ की मैल है, पैसा तो अगर उसने पैसा कमाया जरूर चोरी की है, etc. etc. These kind of narratives, they have to go, they have to end. We have to find our own way, and that is the India way. India way. It has a bit of capitalism, it has a bit of socialism, but it is our way. Look at people accuse the current government of being right-wing. Where is the right? There is so much left here.
Yeah, so much left here. Yeah, it's largely welfare. So
yeah, so
we've got to figure out something which
welfare has to go with growth.
Yeah, which is socio-capitalism kind of a model.
I think we have perfected welfareism within our limited $2,800 per capita base. We have perfected welfareism. We are a world benchmark. But where is the growth? And I think now, over the next 30 years, 23 years, if you're talking about Viksit Bharat, this growth focus needs to come. Welfare cannot happen without growth or through high inflation if you were to take more taxpayers' money, etc.
Etc. So very well said. So there is this whole concept of Dharmic capitalism which is said, or socio-capitalism. So that means the Raja is supposed to fill the coffers so that the Raja can do welfare or daan. So can we evolve that? So that's your thought. Sonal Mansingh ji, and then I'll bring it to General Athasnen and then Riva ji towards the end. Ji.
And these are grand ideas, and I absolutely look forward to that, although I may not be alive till 2047, Viksit Bharat, but we are on the way. I like that word, Dharmic capitalism, because dharma has been variously defined and understood and misunderstood. But very simply put, the basis on which a civilization should ideally grow. It should be founded on that. And dharayati iti dharma, we all know that.
Dharma, yeah.
But what is that dharayati? So these are the code of conduct, code of cosmic rules. Now if the seasons change, that's the dharma of nature. If you do something wrong, nature punishes you, that's the dharma of nature. So there is a dharma for everything. And once you understand that, then the dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Now I put away moksha because that was added later. But dharma is first. If founded on dharma, then artha, as he mentioned, the growth story can happen in the right way. And then kama, all the needs, all the fulfillment comes.
Very beautifully put, but let me ask you also this, because even when Bhishma is advising Yudhishthira on how to run a country on Rajadharma, he says you got to keep your eyes on what your neighbors are doing. And you got to make sure your borders can't be breached. You have to ensure that you police your own streets too. All of this is there. Your thoughts?
You see the sutra that you spoke about, Krishna's, the sutra. For me, the sutra is that wonderful term called Bharatiyata, right? Indianness. We mentioned it very briefly. And I think no better example exists of Bharatiyata in Indianness than the Indian Armed Forces, right? I belong to a pure Hindu regiment, the Garhwal Rifles.
Garhwal.
Come from Uttarakhand, right? We have Padri Vishal Lal Ki Jai, the personification of Lord Vishnu,
Yeah.
right? And that's where our war cry comes from. I'm a Muslim. And I can be a part and I am a part and parcel. My father was from the same regiment. We are a part and parcel of the regiment. We can sit together, we can eat together, everything we do together, fight together. I still remember the times, many times in Sri Lanka, going out with my company, the first thing we would do is, oh, we have forgotten, we have to go back to the mandir. Go back to the mandir, do a small prayer, come back. When you finish your operation, come back again, a little bit of prasad, a little bit of Hajj Jorna in front of the mandir again. Now, all this is an inbuilt thing in the armed forces. And no one questions it. Because the space, it gives, Bharatiyata gives you an Indian space. It gives you your individual space and yet it gives you an Indian space. That space is, I think, the most, is a space which needs to be respected the most.
Yeah.
The aspect of the Indian space.
Yeah. No, I remember I visited a barrack and there was somebody who's performing ardas, another doing puja, and a third who's offering namaz.
Sarvdharm Sthal.
Yeah, the Sarvdharm Sthal, and it was just beautiful. It's just phenomenal. Each respecting the other, each approaching the other, and none wanting to supersede the other. But overall, still remaining very, very, like you said, Bharatiya. Now, how do we find this Bharatiyata in our foreign policy? Final word, ma'am.
We are blessed with a huge diaspora. I mean, look at this, people who have left India 150, 200 years back still feel an Indianness. This is a great asset of the Indian state, and I think we have, policy wise, we have leveraged this very well. I mean, there are innumerable examples of how, the Indian community comes together to help us, in execution of some of our most important foreign policy objectives. So I think the Indian community, in fact, even people who have been away from, who have never stepped onto India, but whose grandparents came from India, still feel more Indian first than their own community. And I'm talking about the large countries which are called Girmitiya countries. The whole area which is called Girmitiya countries. So I think our diaspora is very important, and this is going to continue to be very important. And I think we all have this common identity of being Indian, of being Bharatiya, which when you go abroad you feel it, and you really, it's you feel it everywhere, whether it's cultural expressions, International Yoga Day, or you may name it, or or in terms of those Indians who reached the top echelons of their political or in their judiciary, whose forefathers came from India. You can always there is an interaction with them which is very, very special.
So you think we should leverage that more to our advantage and then use it to try and connect us more?
Absolutely, we are doing it, and it also means a lot of pressure on the system, because there is a demand to take care of them, which I think is our duty to take care of them, especially when they get caught in very difficult conflict situations. So the government of India is doing a very good balance here, and I think they are a very big asset of our foreign policy.
Right. Last, final 30 seconds. I've got to wind
I
up.
just
Yes,
want
ma'am.
to add to what General Saab said, that army and also culture, Sarva Dharma Samabhav.
Yeah.
And Muslim Gayak, Dagar, he begins with Om Tat Sat. I dance to any, I've danced to Nanak Ji, I've danced to everything. Muslims are dancing Kuchipudi, Bharatanatyam, Odissi. Hindus are dancing this. So I think art is another field where there is no bias, and there's such beautiful togetherness.
True. If we can all bring it to...
I learned, she mentioned Dagarji, I learned Drupad from Wasifuddin Dagarji.
Wow.
And he's a Muslim, he's a practicing Muslim, but I haven't seen a bigger Shiv Bhakt than Wasifuddin Dagar.
Wasif's father and Chacha Ji were and the big ones, they were my friends.
Wow.
Big Dagar Sahib.
See, Haji, please.
I may just add that I have led 8 Amarnath Yatras personally.
Lovely.
Right?
So
So I'm a
fantastic.
Shiv Bhakt too.
Fantastic. I think this all talks about this aspect of Bharatiyata, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to hold together and we need to embellish. And from that Bharatiyata, that is the sutra, that chord, and everything else will be strung together. Thank you very much. Lovely conversation. Amazing. Happy Independence Day. Thank you so much.
Independence
Thank
Day.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.